What's up, everybody? Death and Narratives podcast. Phil here. This is like our third false start. Comrades here. Um, this is a chart we wanted to bring to the light to people who don't know the reality of the strategic crude oil reserves. So this is a chart. Maybe we'll do some quick math on it too. But do you want to explain what this is, Conrad?
Yeah, I mean, it's fairly simple. It's just you got the y-axis is the number of barrels of oil in thousands, and the x-axis is the time going back to the 80s of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. And you can kind of look at it, right? Like they started filling it up 1981, 82. Pretty quickly it passed 250,000. It's jogging along. There's a couple dips, in the 90s it dipped for a tiny bit, and then like in the it started to go down a little bit the end of the 90s, 2000, 2003 or something like that. There's a little bit of dip, and then they started really filling it up. I mean, they're probably building out new infrastructure, a couple little here and there. There's kind of a fairly significant dip like the one before in 2000, like early 2003 or something like that. It's pretty consistent, going down a little bit, starting to go down over, you know, 3 years, and then all of a sudden, boom! What's this right here? That's what happened here? Where's that big fall off, right? Um, that is what happens when you sanction one of the world's largest oil producers, which is Russia. Uh, so it's largely self-inflicted, right? That was a Biden administration policy, right? And it was an attempt to put pressure on Russia, but you know, here's a little bit of a proof in the proofs in the pudding, right after 2020, that it wasn't actually really hurting necessarily Russia that much, but it was doing damage to our strategic reserves. Um, but eventually, right, what happened is Russia didn't stop selling oil; they just sold it through middlemen, and then it was going through India. Price sort of balanced back out because the amount of oil being produced never actually went away. It was just being sold through different pathways. And they started to fill it, right, all the way up until 2026. They went from like 350 million barrels, I think, is that dip there, all the way up to probably like, I don't know what that is. Probably like,
I think it
I
was
think it was like
440 or
420.
something like that.
Yeah,
The height
440.
before this.
And then all of a sudden, boom! Look at that! Look at that line there. I mean, that is pretty dramatic.
Yeah.
I mean, that straight down line, and there's nothing else like that on that chart. Like literally the whole chart. There's nothing as dramatic as that. Even those little dips,
Yeah.
like before, like the one in 2012 or whatever, that dip there, which is fairly significant in the rest of the graph. Like that dip is not as straight down, like as precipitous as this drop here. Um, and like folks, like we're not mathematicians. We're not.
We're not engineers,
We're not economists.
logistics
We're not
people.
people. We don't really have advanced degrees in anything. I mean, you got a bachelor's degree. I got
I
some
did
education, but
understand it. So yeah.
I don't have a bachelor's degree. But if I were a betting man, as they say, if I were a betting
If
man,
I were to
I
bet,
would bet that this steep ass drop is not something that is going to reverse extremely quickly. And if we compare that drop, right, to the previous one, right, like the one before it, I mean that is very steep, right, but it's not quite as steep as this one. Um, that didn't. I mean, it took a lot longer to go back up than it did to go down. Put it like that.
mm-hmm.
Um, so I've got some things to say about this, but let me hear your thoughts on this. I mean, let's also scroll down to let's get the exact number,
Oh yeah,
like
let's
the
do
week
that.
by week. 'Cause there's some interesting data here
So
in
this
this
is
chart. This is what I
some of
don't
the
remember.
interesting stuff. And for those who don't know, just in the broadest, most generalist terms, what this is America's Strategic Crude Oil Reserves. So this basically is what the government subsidizes. They buy on their own um, to fill up these, mostly these huge salt caverns, basically in the southern U.S. with oil actually, and
Oh, I didn't realize that.
yeah,
That's
and
what they
a
were.
few underground
Oh.
tanks. But and what they do is they use this reserve of crude oil in times of crisis, war, oil shocks, oil depletions, economic crises, in order to number one, use it if we have an oil shortage, or subsidize the market, or if the market is if the prices are too of oil are too high for the economy to function properly. Namely, though, this is only a short-term stopgap, because if, let's say, for some reason 20% of the world's oil seems to just stop flowing for the next 2 to 5 years at the very least, um, then you can't necessarily just use all your strategic reserves. I mean, I guess you can, and then you run out of them, which is what any country, I guess, would do. But um, this is really only useful if you're like, hey, we have a 12-day war where OPEC is gonna, like, probably boost the price up because, well, yada yada yada. We can ride that out because we have this many millions barrels of oil. Now, like Conrad just said, we since the Ukraine war, that pretty much halved our strategic reserves. The top is about 725 million barrels. That's what we had in like the early 2000s. After the fall of the Soviet Union, and we kind of cornered the market in terms of economic chicanery, basically. And America was ascendant economically, so we had enough capital to do that. Ukraine comes along, and that basically halves what we had. So we had 725 million. Then Ukraine came along, we had 440 million, or 300 or so. That kind of eased up, like you said, to 440 million. Now, as you see, the latest date here, and this is reporting week by week, is 6/19, and that's at 330 million. I think what I have been hearing, and like you said, I'm not a betting man. I'm not an engineer. I don't do logistics for a living. I'm not on the stock market, but my analysis of this is line go down. And I think line go down, very down. It's basically what we all need to recognize and realize. Um, the the in graphing terms, the slope of this line is very steep. It's very steep. If we look week to week, before 619 was 612. It went from 331 to 340. That's about 9 million barrels decreasing that week. Before that, it was 349, so another 9 million barrels, right? So basically, every week, we're losing about 9 million barrels that's getting flooded into the market, into jet fuel production, and into the military's use of gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel. Now, my analysis from hearing what other analysts have been saying about this is that if we were to take this trend line, right, 330 million and 9 million barrels a day, that's basically, let's just round up to 10 million barrels, right? That would be, what, 33 months, right? So that would be pretty far out for depleting it. That'd be like 3 years. But that's not the full story, because these salt caverns, basically, from what I've heard, structurally, in order for them to function, they have to have a certain amount of pressure exerted on them. So that means they have to have a certain amount of oil in them in order for them to actually continue to hold the capacity that they have. So what that means is that you can only drain these strategic reserves to at most 20% of their total capacity. So that 20% is about 145 million barrels. So once we get down to 145 million barrels, we're basically that's zero. We can't drain it anymore, or else the strategic reserve is completely useless. Structurally it's compromised. So that cuts our useful crude oil actually in half. We have about 190 million barrels left then, right? 190 million. Okay, well you'd say, okay, that's like, 9 into 19. That's like what, like, another 30, right? So it's like, okay, we'd have like 2 years, right? If that was the case, but that's actually not the case, because of that crude oil, the stuff that's actually useful, the stuff that's called the mid distillate, right? This amount of oil that you can turn from crude oil into oil that is useful as jet fuel or gasoline and diesel, right? That is only about, I think, a third to a half of your total crude oil amount. So we have to cut that down again, right, from 190 to 80 million barrels, right? So we're just doing this math now. We're just cutting it down, right? And then if you think, not all of that 80 million barrels is going to be, right? And 80 million barrels, that's only 10 weeks now, okay? So we're cutting down the lead time that is actually going to lead to depletion here, right? Because we've been running on borrowed time in the economy right now in terms of oil, because when we first started doing this podcast, the first episode was me predicting oil in Pennsylvania would be $5 in 2 or 3 weeks, and it came true. Same with you predicting oil would go up. We were following it. We were correct. Now oil is back down to $3.95 here. The reason that is because we're depleting our strategic reserves extremely fast. Some oil got out because the MOU or whatever, but that can only last for so long. And now if we take that 80 million barrels, right, and we consider that not all of that can be subsidizing the public market for oil and diesel, because of that 80 million, some of it is going to have to go to the airlines for jet fuel, right? Because you have to choose whether you make it into jet fuel or gasoline diesel. So it has to be a choice. So even if you do 40 million barrels diesel and gasoline, 40 million barrels jet fuel, now you're getting down to like 4 or 5 weeks, right? That's very close timeline wise. And then we have one more factor that's going to split up this number, right? The amount of oil, diesel, jet fuel, kerosene, whatever, that goes to the military, because a lot of this stuff is allocated to the U.S. American military, right? And it doesn't touch the markets, nor does it touch the airliners. So let's just say conservatively we split those into 3 groups. 80 million, right, split into 3 groups. That's like 20 to 30 million, right, for each group. The civilian gasoline and diesel market, jet fuel market for the airliners, and the allocation from the U.S. military. Now you're only looking at about 20, 30 million barrels that we have before we are fully depleted of our strategic reserves. So what that means is that you only have 3 to 4 weeks maximum for the strategic reserve to continue to prop up the oil market. It may not mean that we won't have oil, but it will mean that the price shock from not being able to subsidize it will be so severe that it may send the rest of the economy spiraling just from this one shock. And I think this has been our overall prediction for the podcast, or my overall fear, certainly. But also, not just my fear, my hope in a way that this would happen. Um, but this is very important for people to understand, and I think people don't understand it in America. And we just want to put the numbers out there. This is a publicly available website that the U.S. government um, publishes on the clear web. It's there. It's real. Look at the trend line. The line's going down. It's going down very
Right.
fast.
And let's like just look at this data too for a second, right? So we're saying like, let's say, we got 4 weeks,
Right.
right, before it's depleted. Um, Based on, some of this like analysis of like the fact that you can't deplete it past 140 million. Only 80 million really that's left is mid distillate, and that can only be refined into three different categories. But so 4 weeks really. Um, but let's just like look at this for a second, because some people might say like, well, I mean, the MOU went through, Iran opened the Strait of Hormuz, so we're fine, right? Well, let's just, I mean, these are just numbers here, but there's some interesting data in this, right? Um, so all throughout 2025, we can see that it's kind of moving up a little bit. We look at June, the month of June, it stayed at 402 million. July, still at 402. August, now we're up to 403. September, we're getting to 405. It takes taking about a month to add every a million barrels each. It's still going up, all the way. Okay, now let's go forward. We don't have to go through every month, but let's look at let's start looking at February, right? Because that's when the war started. So they got it all the way up to 415 million barrels after it dropped down to kind of a similar level, like 345 million barrels because of the Ukraine shock. So it's at 415 for February 6th, February 13th. We're at 415 still. February 20th, 415.41. Exactly the same number, actually, which is kind of interesting. It didn't even change at all. It's every week. It's pretty much changes a little bit, at least. And then February 27th, exactly the same number. Also, sort of interesting. Um, and then we've got February or March, March 6th. Actually went up, and the war already started. It went up, but only 1,000 barrels. Not very significant, but it is interesting because the strait was closed and it did go up still. Um, so, the oil supply cut off. Why is it still going up? Okay, well then let's look at the next week, March 13th. Strait still closed, right? 415 million and 442,000. Exactly the same number. The next week, exactly the same number. The next week, okay, now it's starting to reverse, but just a little bit. Just for 500,000 barrels in a week, which is maybe it's not actually a little bit, because if we zoom out and we look at how long it takes for it to go up even 1,000,000 barrels, it might take it like some weeks it takes some months, sometimes some months it takes a whole month for them to add 1,000,000 barrels. So we're looking at maybe 2 weeks of adding oil, but let's say it's sort of statistically insignificant. Now we look at April 1st. All right, now we're down 2 million barrels. Okay, pause for a second. So we started the war, let's say, I mean, it was February, it was actually, I think February 20, February 28th, February 27th. Um, Probably when it really started was February 27th. 415 million barrels. And it took all the way until April for it to start going down. The strait was closed the whole time, but throughout all of March, the reserves stayed exactly the same. Right. So what does that indicate? Right. That indicates even though the strait was closed, oil was still coming in because those ships take about a month, maybe more than that, maybe even more than that, right? To reach their destinations, to come from the Persian Gulf all the way to the United States or wherever they're going, or to be shipped around. It's physically moved. It's not like a bank transfer. It takes some time. Right. So when it was the MOU, March, or it was June 10th or something like that, they reopened finally the strait. Well, guess what, folks? It's also going to take another month at least
Right.
for that oil that has just been reauthorized to go through the strait to open back up and to get back here. So we've got at least another 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks before we get anywhere close to the amount of oil coming back in that was similar to the levels we were receiving before the war, which is about a similar number to what we're estimating for how long it's going to take for this reserve to be depleted below, another 30 million barrels. So we're looking at, around, let's say, 300 million barrels or below that things could get kind of dicey. Um, Essentially, right? We're riding the margin of this. Like, we don't know where this is going to go. We don't know how low this is going to go. And let's look at the rate, too, the rate of decline, right? So it starts to decline at first March. The first week of March to April, it goes down 2 million barrels. Next week, it's down about 4. The week after that, 4. The week after that, oh my God, 8. The week after that, okay, starting to slow. 5. Okay, a little bit of a breather. Okay, now we're back to 8 the next week. And now the week after that, 10 million. And then the week after that, 9. And then the week after that, another 8. And then the week after that, another 8. And then the week after that, another 9. And then the week after that, another 9. So we're looking at essentially a line that's potentially going to continue to go down for another 9 million barrels for another 3 to 4 weeks, and then let's say some of the oil that is coming in starts to be bought up by the reserves and they start to try and fill it again. The decline will still be going down. It just might decrease the rate that it's going down. So, and it might be for a long time because let's remember, like, let's just go back to the top of this graph, right? You scroll up to the top. We just look at it in graph form, right? When was the last time this happened, right? Let's zoom in on the Russia-Ukraine war time period. We have a big drop. What we see is it starts to take a little bit of time before it like builds up momentum, and then it's this precipitous drop, and then it doesn't. It kind of bounces there for a second, but then it keeps going down a little bit more at a little bit slower pace. But like, let's remember something else too. Big drop off. It doesn't rebound. It's not like the stock market here,
Yeah.
where, oh wow, everybody bought back in. It's done. It's fixed. It's solved. The number's gone back up. No, this takes real time and energy to build back up. And guess what? They didn't even get, how much. I don't even know how much they lost during this Russia-Ukraine conflict. I mean, if we look
I
at the
mean, it
kind of the top.
started at. I mean, when is the start of this? Right, it's like June
It's like 600
2022.
million barrels or something like that, or 300 million barrels.
I think this is
It's like
right.
roughly the
Six
difference.
hundred fourteen to the lowest 346. So
And then when it recovers right before this war was at like 415. So it took them. When was it at the bottom?
that was 8 4.
2023, the end of 2023. So a year and a half to add 60 million barrels.
Yeah.
It only took a year for them to lose 300 million barrels,
Right.
right? So this thing, 1.1, we're riding the edge, right? We're basically riding the edge of economic destruction. 2.2, there's no using this thing anymore, right?
Yeah.
For the next several years, right? You can't rely on this thing anymore. You used up this card. Like you ended your capacity to lean on this crutch. It's done. You played your hand, and it's over. Unless you can find a way, find a huge, massive source of crude oil, or you just start buying all of the crude oil in the market, which will bid the market way higher if the U.S. government comes in and says we need 10 million barrels of crude oil every week, or five, whatever, however much to keep filling it. Well, guess what? Price is going to keep going up. It's not going to go down, right? So, what are we really looking at here is a strategic asset which has been used to prop up the economy and the military. Um, that one, we're not out of the woods yet, right? I mean, we kind of, Phil and I both think that it's too late, right? We think that we're in for a shock,
We're doomers. Yeah. We think there's no coming back.
and immediately too, in a month, in a few weeks, who knows? And I think it's soon, because I think um, the immediate drop that was caused by futures prices that led to a drop in spot price, I think that's increasing consumption, and I think that's going to accelerate the rate of consumption, even though we're not out, right? We're not out of the woods yet, right? We don't have the flow coming back through the strait. Um, but even if we are wrong, right? This war isn't over. This conflict hasn't strategically been solved. Iran and the United States are destined for another conflict. The United States will not stop its campaigns in the Middle East. It will resume them again at some point in the future. And even if it's years in the future, this will not be recovered by that point in time. And Iran will be able to choke the U.S. economy out, choke the oil industry that fuels the U.S. economy into an economic collapse. So what we're looking at, I think, is this is essentially one, um, first and foremost, a strategic defeat of the United States, an inevitable strategic defeat of the United States. There is no looking at this data, which honestly, it looks so boring because it's just a graph and numbers, but it is so significant because these numbers are empirical proof of the destruction of American supremacy and hegemony. Um, and we are not. I mean, the average person, right? I always fall into this trap, and everybody I think falls into this trap where we talk about America collectively like we're all the same,
Right.
but we're not. Americans are not all the same. We're not all in the same boat. We're not in it together. We're against each other,
Yeah.
right? Americans are, working class Americans are pitted against each other by the ruling class. The ruling class wages war on us and exploits us on a day to day basis. Um, and this is going to punish American people, or working people. This is not going to punish the rulers, right? The ruling class, the oligarchy, they'll be fine. But um, what this is essentially, the U.S. Iran has utilized sanctions. Is almost identical type of sanction, except it's more advanced because it is an actual thing. It's not them just punishing people for not using like with weird um, trade embargoes on certain corporations and like financial tools. Like this is an actual physical uh, embargo on the United States that has brought it to its knees and will have the same effect that American sanctions have had on other countries um, in terms of destroying their economy. And I hope that people take this anger, working people who are going to pay the price for this, right? Working people are paying the price. It's not it's not the people who actually deserve it, right? But I hope that we take that energy and wake the fuck up, and start working together and start organizing to take our energy out on our real enemies, right? Which is the American ruling class, which are the enemies of the entire world. The American ruling class and the British ruling class are, and the French and all the other whatever the European people. But those are the enemies of the world. And there's a very small number of people. Even the average millionaire isn't included in these clubs. They might do the dirty work of these people, but realistically, we're talking about 10,000 people, 20,000 people who are responsible for this, right? Who need to be deposed and essentially, um, it's not who they are, and it's not their it doesn't need to be personalized, but it's just their assets and their power needs to be taken away from them and given to working class individuals, right? This like complete distortion in the economy where like the average person can't buy eggs, but some dude is like building a spaceship to like fly around the planet. It's bullshit. It's absolute bullshit. It is a complete bankruptcy of an ideology. Is a complete the complete end of any sort of semblance of sanity. It makes no fucking sense. It is the amalgamation of human sin and corruption and destruction, and it has to come to an end, and it will come to an end, and it's up to us to make it come to an end. So I hope this wakes people up. I really do. I hope this wakes people up, and I feel sorry for everybody who is going to have to pay the price for this insane decision. It is an absolutely fucking insane decision. Like, let's just be realistic here. This did not need to happen. There's no reason for this at all, other than insane ruling class pieces of garbage who have lost touch with any semblance of reality, right? And we say this, that they've lost touch with any semblance of reality because they were defeated, right? They didn't win this war. If they won the war, we could at least say they had some semblance of reason for waging this war, which was to win. They're still evil, but like at least we could say that they have some sort of logical functioning. They do not. They have lost touch with reality. They are evil. They have to be defeated, overthrown, and have the power that they hold not just replaced with some other oligarch and billionaire or millionaire or bureaucrat, government bureaucrat. It has to be channeled into an actual people popular movement that is held and organized by the working class. The working people have to seize power, seize the means of production, take it away from these people. They do not have your interest in mind. We all know this. We have to stop them. We can stop them. Look at who's stopping them now, right? I hope this inspires people. A small country which was poor and bullied for decades is defeating the most powerful empire and the most powerful ruling class in history easily within weeks. So I think I hope this inspires people to to move forward, and I am um, my heart goes out to everybody who's going to suffer for this.
Very well said. Very well said. Totally agree with everything. And we're riding on the razor's edge right now. We are riding on the razor's edge, and people think we're weird and delusional for saying it might be 2 weeks, it might be 2 weeks, it might be 4 weeks, it might be a month. But here's the graph, folks. Here's the chart. This is reality, and it's sort of like a snowball falling down a mountain, and it starts to accumulate snow. You can stop it. You can stand in front of it. If it's this big, it's that big, it's the size of your head, maybe. You can stand in front of it. But once it's halfway down that mountain, it's 4 foot in diameter, it's too big. You can't step in front of it, and you can't stop it. And it hasn't crashed into something at the bottom of the hill, but that's where we're at now. This line is like the snowball it's huge, and it's gained so much speed. It hasn't crashed yet, but it's almost unstoppable even if you put a bunch of stuff in front of it. It might slow it down, but I just can't see how it could come back. I can't see it.
Well, let me just look at this fucking graph. Like, just the more you look at it, the more ridiculous it becomes, because we have two comparisons here, right? We have two side by side comparisons of historical events and policies, right? There's the Russia-Ukraine war, where they sanctioned Russia's economy. It lost half, 300 million barrels, right, of the reserve. Look at how long it took for it to get going, though. Like, when it really, like, for it to start getting into this stride of this rapid decrease. Why, like, can you put your cursor over that? Like, from the start of whatever that first dip was, before it really starts to peak. So that's March. So 2020. Okay, so September 2021 all the way to like March, before it hits its like maximum rate of decrease, and then it looks like it's pretty much the same rate for how many weeks was that? The second, or I mean February to, so 10 months. The 10 months it was in that pattern where it was free falling, and then it took some time for it to correct. But look at the fucking difference here, right? I mean, it's not. It took like
Look at the
six.
animation just for me.
It took like 10 months for it to go from, or I don't know how you say,
It's a, it's a,
5
right
months.
angle, for Christ's sake. Look at
It's
It's
that
almost
is.
straight down. It's almost it's it's
I
this is like
don't think that that's going to be corrected in time. I mean, I don't think it's going to be corrected. Like, look, even if it starts to kind of turn back the other, like it starts to become less steep, it's still going to be going down. Um,
I,
like, there's nothing else like that on that graph for the entire period.
so
There's no drop like that. I mean,
this
that
is
one in
insane.
that there's a couple little blips downward, right? And I think that's really what the whole reserve was intended for, was
Reserve
like,
stuff, yeah.
let's sell 30 40 million barrels right now so we
Yeah.
can drop the price or something like that. I don't know. I mean, manipulation was probably not like the original intent. The original intent was just some sort of subsidy, and made in the guise of an argument that this is gonna help the economy. and create a buffer. But like, my God, this is not. I mean, folks, this is a bad sign
This is not.
if you're the U.S. government
This is really
and
bad.
if you're interested in the U.S. economy. Like, let's just kind of recognize like what is the economy realistically, right? People doing things, people moving things around, people making things, people buying those things. There's goods and services and there's an exchange in dollars, right? That's essentially what it is. It's just services and labor being exchanged for dollars to make things or to do things. Everything we have that requires making something and doing something, you need to get in your car to do that, right? In America, people need to get in their car and drive to a place where they go and do that thing. The goods that move around need to be driven by vehicles. Um, some of the time, those goods need to be made with oil and with petroleum. So the effects of this, I mean, I can't even really begin to comprehend them.
Yeah.
Like I really, I don't even think this could be. I mean, like the amount of destruction this
This
could do is
this
astronomical.
could be catastrophic. This could be absolutely catastrophic. This could be, I don't want to say apocalyptic, but it could be. And I think for so long I was very doomer accelerationist. I think you were very like, no, Do you think I've always was like, do you think America's gonna be like, boom, explosion, 2020, crazier, or do you think it's gonna be like England where it just is like slow decline, And I think now I'm feeling, and I don't know, I thought this was gonna happen earlier too, multiple times. So obviously I could be wrong. We could be wrong. These numbers are really like, they're really putting a shock on our faces because now we fully can see the trend line, and it just seems so soon, and that there is no, I mean, Iran went to Switzerland, to Borgenstock, totally capitulating to diplomacy with America. Even then, Donald Trump himself could not stop himself from tweeting in the White House threats to Iran and the negotiators while they were negotiating, which would be the only possible way that this situation could get better in any sort of small, infinitesimally small sense. And it was so bad, apparently, that the Iranian delegation walked out not once, not twice, but 3 times, and they had to be coaxed by the Pakistanis and the Qataris to no, come back, no, wait, no, we can figure this out, no, come back, no. And these are the reformists. Okay, these are people who want to make a deal. And it apparently got so bad that the Saudi foreign minister, Prince Faisal, had to get on the phone and call Asim Munir, who's the head of the military of Pakistan, and tell them, we will personally guarantee the frozen assets of Iran to keep this going. Because they said this deal cannot fail. It cannot fail. And I think because they're in the same situation in a way, not the same situation as America, but like they're in that situation where if this deal fails, war comes back, their whole economy is in shambles, right? So that's where all these Gulf countries are at. It's just like we're at. We are in shambles, but the difference is the Gulf countries realize it and they're scrambling to make something happen. They're, $12 billion, we'll fly that into you right now. We'll do it tomorrow. We'll guarantee it to you. Versus like you said, the deranged and unhinged people in the White House, in Israel, who cannot stop. They cannot stop their threats, their attacks, their provocations, and even when they're someone's telling them, hey, the world economy might collapse if you do this, they go, oh, but what if I tweet? I need to tweet and fucking be like, you guys, we're gonna kill you if you don't sign a deal. We're gonna kill you. It's so backwards, and I think, we have to admit we were wrong. We didn't think the MOU was even going to breach containment out of someone's head. We were wrong about that. They went to Switzerland, they signed something, but I think we were still right in the sense that as the MOU is happening, right, they're walking out. Israel is still in Lebanon, even though they've been like, well, we're going to do a partially ceasefire. Ceasefire that isn't really a ceasefire. We'll maybe stop advancing. Oh, they're still killing people. They're still fighting Hezbollah. Iran just attacked a tanker in Strait of Hormuz because it didn't go. So things are still happening. Strikes are going on in Iran right now. So maybe it's slowed down, but there isn't stop. It's the snowball, right? This analogy. The snowball is continuing to roll down the hill. It might have hit something and now it's slowed down, but it's going to gain speed again.
Yeah.
Right? And I just don't think we can stop this. And I think people need to wake up and realize this. It can be very frightening because this is every part of even people in the cities, right, who don't use cars, they don't live near food production. So food has to be trucked into these cities, right? So even if you don't drive anywhere, I'll be fine. I go to work, I work remote, I do a fake laptop job. Okay, but you're not going to have food in your supermarket. What happens? We really need to understand this. What happens? What happens when you're in the countryside and you can't drive anywhere? What happens? What happens when you can't run the tractor because the diesel is $20 a fucking gallon and you can't plant? What happens? This is not COVID. It's much worse. This is not the 70s oil shocks. It's much.
Yeah, that was only 5%. That was only 5% of the world's oil getting cut off. This is 20. This is close to 20.
Compounding.
And I would like to make 2 points. One is kind of a synthesis of current events, right, with the Strait opening, right, and we hope that this trend reverses, let's say for our sakes, because our cost of living is going to go up dramatically, right, if this thing goes crazy. But there is the point to be made, too, that even though the Strait of Hormuz is open, flow will not reach the levels that it reached before the war for a long time, right? One, there's still massive numbers of mines in the strait, which means that ships can't necessarily be insured for through passage, which means a lot of ships won't go, which means flow will be lower. Two is that the strait is remaining under Iranian control, which means Iranian ships will be prioritized for passage. And if other ships try to maneuver in other ways, right, they get shot at, like the one the other day. This decreases the incentive for shipping companies to operate in this channel. I think we're not going to see the strait or reach the levels that it reached in terms of activity for a very long time. The other point I'd like to make is that it's possible, right? The reason that the Iranians are negotiating now is because, and they're not keeping it closed for significantly longer, or totally closed for a lot longer, is because they know that the damage is already done.
Yeah.
Right? They know that this trend isn't going to be reversed for a long time, and it's possible that they're recognizing that, they might even be trying to do damage control so that they don't inflict too much harm on the economy. They're doing the same. They've done the same thing, right, with their strikes, which are measured strikes. Initially 1-to-1, every asset that the Americans and the Israelis hit, an equivalent asset was being hit by the Iranians. Then, they upgraded it to 1.5 to 2 times as much damage, which is why that last spat only lasted a week, right? They blew up 12 F-35s in one hangar, which is over $1 billion in damage with one missile in 7 minutes, right? One missile that cost, you know, less than $1 million to make.
Yeah.
I mean, probably, I don't even know how much. Well, I don't know what their missiles are. I think it was a Chinese missile, actually, but I'm sure it was probably $100,000, maybe less than that, maybe more than that. But certainly not $1 million. But um, they're doing a calculated response, right? I think they may have recognized that they've already done the damage to the U.S. economy, that this trend is irreversible. And in our defense, too, for looking for our assumption that like everything was going to collapse a lot sooner economically, I think it is helpful to look at this chart and to understand the strategic reserve. That was just something we underestimated, right? We underestimated the size, the immense scale of this reserve, and the oil manufacturing in the United States, right? I mean, I think I said on this, like at the start of this, that I didn't think there was going to be shortages for at least a little while, because the U.S. is such a large producer. But it turns out that we maybe don't produce quite as much oil as we say we do,
Right.
and a
But
lot
we
of those
don't
are
refine much of the oil
right.
that we produce. So this is the jacked up economic spaghetti where we 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 produce a fair amount of oil coming out of the ground through fracking and a lot of liquefied natural gas, but a lot of it we have to sell to other people who can refine it, and refineries of other countries sell it back to us. So it's this sort of
Right.
cycling effect. So we are
Right.
not insulated just because we produce the oil, because we're not self sufficient in our refining. So even if we export a bunch, we still have to buy oil back in order to have refined oil. So and that has to be transported on the seas, right? So this is, I mean, if every fucking country is at war with us, that's not going to be fun. If crude oil prices are at $180 a barrel, that's not going to be very fun. You're going to sell it for 180, they're going to sell it back to you for 185. So it doesn't really matter that much, because America is so stupid and everything has been outsourced. It's like, oh, we can't have a oil refining plant because if we were to do that in America, first of all, it would be done so haphazardly that the thing would fucking explode 4 times a year. I'm looking at you, PES oil refinery, and we have to close it down because everyone's so fucking mad at it because it's leaking fucking cancerous chemicals into the air and killing people. So we just couldn't do it because we'd not spend enough money to do it safely, an industrial project safely and the right way. People would be too annoyed at our infrastructure, and then we couldn't possibly, pay the salaries of enough people to actually like meaningfully upkeep it. So we have to outsource that to other countries, put that in Venezuela or Mexico, and because it's somehow worked out for us that it'll be cheaper if we just pump it and other people refine it so that we don't have to upkeep that production capacity. Well, now you're looking at other countries like Iran who has, because of sanctions that we've put on them, domestic pumping, right? They pump oil out the ground. They refine oil out of those pumping stations. And then they put it on ships that go all around the world. They sell it everywhere. Okay, so it's a closed loop within their own economy because it has to have been, because they've had sanctions on their economy for so long. We don't have that. So it doesn't matter. We only have one of a few of those things. We don't produce tanker ships. Really, we have tiny ship building capacity. We don't refine oil. But we produce some of it. We pump some of it out of the ground. We frack some of it out of the ground. So, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Isn't it crazy that just by hitting a few oil refineries, a few oil depots, not all of which Iran did, must be put into perspective, some of which the Israelis did false flags on, looking at like the Qatari, one of their hugest oil depots, which it was speculated that the Israelis actually blew up in order to coax them into fighting Iran. Which is another own goal, just another person punching themselves in the face and the dick, right? But isn't it funny that within, like you said, Iran, within weeks, using a few missiles and a few drones, and on a military scale, it's just a few. Let's just be real. They have totally upended American hegemony, but American hegemony is so deeply rooted in the logistical functioning of the world economy that it will indeed collapse the world economy, because the world economy is built on the foundation of American hegemony, right? All of, like, most of the global oil exports from the Middle East, which is most of oil exports, you know, besides like Southern America and Russia, you know, like that is all been structured on the petrodollar. So if you see, this is the contradiction for Iran right now, which, right, like you explained, may be why they're kind of being a little, okay, let's be reformist and let's, you know, walk it back a little bit, because to do destruction on American hegemonic control over global resources, like the oil industry, is to therefore destroy large parts of how the economy functions, because they have totally captured how that economy functions on a global scale. So this is hard for them because America has so adequately captured these markets that attacking them pretty much plunges everybody into disarray and chaos, because it's like every other country has pretty much depended on, oh, well, how are we going to get oil? I bought all these bonds so that I could buy oil, and now they're not exporting oil, and what do I do with these bonds? And the bond market collapses, and then now my bonds, and now my market's collapsing because all of my market is based on American bonds, right? So this is a knock-on effect now, and it's insane because this is such a paper tiger, like you mentioned. This just took some drones. Iran does not have an air force, people. It has some fucking MiGs that they bought from Russia a couple years ago. That's it. Yemen does not have a navy. These countries, they just have some missiles. They have an army. You know, they have some smart people. It does not take much. And within a few weeks, they've descended the world into chaos because the Americans have so completely captured the rest of the world with their previous power, you know, which no longer really precedes them, that attacking their structure now, it just has this whole effect. This whole effect is just collapsing, you know what I mean? It's almost like if you pursued like a corruption case in America, like actually pursued it at a very high level, like Epstein or something, everyone who is in the American government pretty much, except for like Ro Khanna, maybe Thomas Massey, you know, really pretty much everybody else pretty much doesn't want to talk about it. Why? Because you can't just explicate Jeffrey Epstein and be like, this guy's a bad guy from the situation. He knows everybody. The FBI, the CIA, the DNI, DOJ. They're all implicated in this. If you uncover what he does, you create this cascading effect. Everybody. Okay, look at Peter Thiel. He had the emails leaked with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, have you heard about this story? The Dialogue Conference? Peter Thiel co-founded this conference called the Dialogue Conference. It's one of those secret societies where a bunch of like scientists and celebrities and politicians and rich people go to a backdoor closed conference to like talk about policy or whatever, which, you know, they're basically talking about how they're going to rule the world or whatever. And it was leaked, all these names of like who the attendees of this conference are. And this is like just one step removed from Jeffrey Epstein, Peter Thiel, you know? And then that is one step removed from, okay, there's just some Wharton professor at UPenn, you know? But it's like, this pervades every single society and institution, you know what I mean? And so it's sort of like that is what's happening right now, where it's like, okay, you can hit a couple oil depots in the Gulf countries, but that props up American hegemony in the Middle East. That props up the economy, the domestic economy in America. That props up our military, right? So you end up this knock-on effect where everything gets touched now. And there is no going back. There's no going back, right? You can't just like, people aren't forgetting about Epstein. People aren't like, there's no opening the strait. Like you said, it's going to take minimum years, 2 to 10 years minimum to repair all these oil depots. That's if they do it continuously. If they start right now, if nothing goes off without a hitch. You're saying, you know, there's mines in the strait. Well, there's also, you know what I realize? If you park a huge oil tanker in a body of water for 5 months, you can't just start it back up. You realize this? I didn't realize this. It has to get serviced. You have to get a crew. You have to service it. You have to check everything. You have to read. So there's so many moving parts to this that one of them, if they went wrong, it would be disaster. If Iran just mined the strait, if America just did airstrikes on Iran and they retaliated, if the strait was closed for just 1 month, right? If the strategic reserves were just drawn down, you know, for 1 month to 200,000 barrels, 200 million barrels, all of those things alone would be really bad. But you have all of those things together, and it just feels like we could do an MOU, we could open the strait for a little bit, some ships will get out. You could do a few things. Hell, maybe right now you do everything right and you turn everything around, but the damage is already so advanced. I don't know if it would even make a difference now. That's the problem. That's the problem, really, because if you made a treaty with Iran today, and they were with all Gulf countries, and you had a whole new security architecture, there was détente, there was this, there was that, and there became a new reality, and immediately everyone started repairing every oil depot, every oil exporting port in the Gulf countries, and tried to get them as quickly as possible back to 100%, tried to get everything out of the Gulf, whether it was paid for with a toll or not, tried to get the production capacity back to where it was. It's still going to take years. It's still going to take years. And if you look at the fucking chart, we don't have years. We have weeks. So, what are we doing here, folks? What are we doing? We can't be tweeting. We can't. I just can't. These people they're too dumb. They're too stupid. They're too delusional. They're too craven. It can't happen. Let me give you an example. I mentioned this, but I didn't fully dive into this in one of the episodes, but I talked about JFK in negotiating the Cuban Missile Crisis. He did a backdoor deal where he said, if you take the ICBMs out of Cuba, I'll take the Jupiter missiles out of Turkey. Okay? The only reason that deal was able to go through and able to happen was because it was in secret. So what happened was the Soviet press said, "Hey, like we've reached a deal. You know, they're removing missiles on our border. You know, we've rebuffed NATO and American forces." And what did the American press say? "Hey, we've reached a deal. We've strong-armed them, and we got ICBMs out of Cuba." So it made both domestic diplomatic wins, which were really losses for both countries, you know, taking these things out. It turned them into wins for each country. But the key here is they didn't have fucking Twitter, okay? So they didn't have Twitter, because if you had Twitter, then you'd have somebody in the Soviet government going, you know, I can't believe that we're taking ICBMs out of Cuba. You know what I mean? And that'd be all over the Soviet, you know, social media. It'd be like, you guys can't take ICBMs out of Cuba. Fuck America. We need to help Cuba. Right, okay. And then you'd have probably some undersecretary of state in America going, we need to fucking nuke fucking Soviet Union today. Okay, so you see what I'm saying? You can't make, everyone's saying all Trump needs to do is leave the region, act like it's a win, and just dust up his hands and take a step back. And everything will calm down and oil production will okay, but this can't happen. You can't do this mutually exclusive diplomatic win, because there is no like you couldn't go into Miami, Florida and pick up a Soviet newspaper and read about the Jupiter missiles coming out of Turkey, right? So that's the difference. We all know everything's happening minute by minute. And people,
that's a good point,
diplomatically, and this is the problem too. It used to be like someone could post a video on YouTube and it wouldn't fucking matter because Angela Merkel would be in a closed room making a deal. But now, because of Trump, diplomacy and politics happens on Twitter. It happens because of Twitter, right? It happens because of YouTube. Okay? So they can't posture, right? They can't have a closed door deal and then say, okay, look, in the press, I'm going to say this. In the press, you're going to say that. But nobody's going to know that we both made concessions and we're both doing this backdoor deal. No, as soon as Trump says something, someone in Iran is going to see that. And they're going to be like, these fucking people are crazy. We can't trust them. They're making threats. We have to rebuff them, you know? So it's impossible. In the telecommunications and media landscape, it has dominated diplomacy now. And it is impossible to do that. So that would probably be the only way we could do a diplomatic spin on things. But as we've seen, like, they're walking out of negotiations because Trump is tweeting. Okay, so this is, you can't have it both ways. You can't give a concession to the other country, you know, but at the same time, domestically, make some media spinning it as a win and threatening the other country, because that will be taken as now an official diplomatic statement and not just something that's in the media. And then the other side will be forced to respond to that in kind. And that may bleed into the negotiations. So you can't, how traditional diplomacy worked from the Cold War, which was, we have to give concessions, but we won't admit that domestically, and we'll both spin this as a win to our domestic audiences so we can sell it to our domestic audiences politically, at the same time reaching détente in secret. That can't happen. It can't happen anymore. And so we're stuck between a rock and a hard place. Trump is zugzwang, right? It's any move he makes, it makes it worse. And he can make better conservative moves, but he won't dig himself out. I just think that's the case. People have to realize this. No one really
Yeah,
realizes this.
I mean, look at the strikes today, right? They launched. I don't know. I can't figure out what the fuck they even attacked. It's probably just symbolic for them, but it's just him lashing out, trying to appear, trying to make it seem like he's still in a winning position, right? When this is clearly a defeat. Um, and Folks, this thing isn't over by a long shot. Um, it's just, it's not even close,
It's just
right?
beginning, brother. It's just beginning. All the
Yeah,
people on Wall Street who think, Trump, Venezuela, that was a week and a half thing. He did all these entanglements and then he somehow gets himself out of it. This is Trump's descent right here. It seemed like Trump for so long, for years, for his whole life, could literally get out of anything. Bankruptcy, indictments, political scandal, allegations of rape and pedophilia. And it seemed like he's somehow bobs and weaves through all of this and comes out on top. That's what the second election sort of proved to people. And so people in the market in America aren't realizing this because they think, oh, Trump's saying he's going to bomb Iran, but that's just Trump. Trump just says that, Look, they're doing an MOU. Look, they're going to do a deal. He'll get out of there. Biden got out of Afghanistan. People said that would be bad for the economy, and it was bad, but we recovered. Stuff like that. But no, he didn't get out of Ukraine, and he started this now. And guess what? They're both happening in tandem now. In tandem, guys. This is not the end of the Iran war. This is the beginning of a very, very protracted conflict. And the beginning of what is probably a totally new geopolitical, economic, militarily world order. It has to be said. Within a few weeks, you have, and this is very complicated, we have to admit, this is very complicated. You have Iran at war with America, Israel, and Gulf countries. Gulf countries now reproaching Iran because they realize they've been defeated and they need to work with Iran. China backing Pakistan to lead those Gulf countries in bridging the gap between them and their American backers and negotiations with Iran. And Pakistan, even recently, having sort of a proxy warfare with Israel because apparently it was uncovered by the Pakistani ISI that Israel was planning to assassinate some of the negotiation team in Switzerland, no less.
yeah, I
In
heard about that. Yeah,
Switzerland, which they eventually acquiesced to going because the Qataris owned the resort, and they literally made a no-fly zone over the whole resort. That's the level that they had to go to secure the site.
Jesus
And the
Christ.
Pakistanis said to the Israelis, apparently in a back channel, this is all reported by a man, Zulfikar Ali, which does a show with Pepe Escobar and Larry Johnson, Transition Protocol, who has apparently a source on the negotiation team. So this is apparently from a person who's there, who's literally there hearing this, that Asim Munir, Field Marshal of Pakistan, leader of the military and basically leader of the country, picked up the phone to Netanyahu and said, in no uncertain terms, if you do that, we will flatten you. Period. Point blank. So now there is a proxy conflict maybe between Israel and Pakistan. Okay? So within a number of weeks, from February 28th, just a handful of months, the landscape has shifted seismically. Seismically. Who would have predicted? Who would have predicted Oman would be reaching out to partner with Iran on Strait of Hormuz transit? Who would have predicted China would be backing Pakistan as the organizer of a new security architecture in Western Asia. Who would have predicted the Gulf countries would reproach back to Iran in order to court Iranians who seem ascendant in the region now? Who would have predicted that Iran itself would be targeting mostly Gulf countries and their American-backed assets instead of Israel, realistically? Who could have predicted that the Lebanese president would be collaborating with, well, that makes sense because that dude's a fuck. But they're just, it's changing so quickly. These are things that if America hadn't done this, it has to be said, if America had not preemptively striked Iran to preempt Israel's strike on Iran, which is the most retarded thing I've ever heard in my life, if they hadn't done that, none of this would have been happening. None of this would have been happening. Look at the chart. We would have been at about 442 million barrels of oil in our strategic reserves. Our economy was recovering ostensibly, slightly from the Ukraine war, from the drastic initial results of the protracted Ukraine war, which continues. That's all thrown down the drain, and it's spiraling so quickly out of control that the longer it goes, the more drastic countries will have to change their geopolitical reality to cope economically with the effects of this. And things that we think BRICS and the SEO and whatever the new security architecture in the Western Asia region is going to be called, things that we would have thought taken, years now are taking weeks and months. So this is the state of the world we're in. There are 6 new banks that signed up for CIPS, centralized cross-border interbanking service or whatever, which is China's way of sending money from banks to banks without SWIFT. You had recently panda bonds being sold by German banks from Deutsche Bank.
Uh-oh.
And investors, retail investors, or not retail investors, institutional investors running to them like wildfire to buy them up. This is in a German bank, in Deutsche Bank, okay? This is Germany, the place
I should
occupied
buy
by
some
American
fucking
forces.
Chinese bonds.
Right. So this is the level of shift that's happening before our eyes. Who's ready for it? I don't know if anybody is. Who's going to come out on top? Who's to say? This is a very fluid time. It's a very fluid time, and things can and will change on a dime.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think I just don't know where this thing is going to go. I mean, it's I'd like to believe that we're out of it, and that things will kind of go back to normal. Oh, excuse me, but I mean, as much as the normalcy here sucks, it's still at least you can survive, or at least I can survive, and people I know are still able to survive. But I and we got the data right here. I mean, we've been saying what's going to happen for a long time, but here's the fucking evidence. And right, we might think that we'll still have oil. We'll still be able to do some things, but it's just, 20% of the shit we have to do has to go away, right? That's what that means. It means we have to cut our economy the fuel in our economy, which is essentially just our economy, right, by 20%. Because we get to pick 1/5 less people who are driving to work, 1/5 people less people who are 1/5 less trucks that are driving goods around. It's just manufacturing. I mean, we still do make stuff in this country. I don't know anybody that works in a factory, but there, places in the Midwest that do manufacture things, and um, we're gonna see I think, a pretty big spike in unemployment, and it's gonna lead to a downward spiral. I really do not think that we're gonna get off easy with this one. I don't think we're gonna luck our way out of this one. I think our economy isn't robust enough. Our government isn't robust enough to really handle this, and it's a shame. It is a shame because I mean, I hope people use it to, sometimes, right, in life, you know in my life at least, the worst things that have happened to me, that's where I've improved the most and grown the most as a human being. So something that can look like poison at first can actually make you stronger and make you better. So maybe that's the lesson going to be the lesson in this, and I think that's what you and I are hoping for.
Yeah. The silver
But
lining is that I think the essence of life is struggle, and America, it fundamentally needs that struggle a little bit. We, as a
yeah,
working class, are pitted, but there are so many people, the laptop class, I like to call them, the middle class millionaires, the political class, they need to be put into a sense of struggle, and they need to be hardened in order for our leaders to make clairvoyant decisions, because they're just so ridiculously insane at this point because they've been spoiled. And so that needs to stop and that needs to go away. And maybe, hopefully, that this will do this. Maybe not. But that's all that we can hope for. Um, I know we were going to react to something, but it's a bit late. So I think I'll just um, start to wind it down. I want to leave with this. So were you? I can't remember. Were you there at the Drexel graduation that I went to in the
I can't
stadium?
remember. I don't think I went to that one.
Yeah.
No.
Well, we had one of the worst commencement speeches I've ever witnessed. Um, it was like pre-recorded from a Zoom call because the guy couldn't make it.
Jesus Christ. So just
Already so asinine, and it was. Guess who it was? It was the UMD president. It was the University of Maryland president, who's probably
what?
just a guy that John Fry knows, and was like, "Can you just do a commencement speech for me?" And he just hopped on Zoom, and it was
Yeah.
obvious that it wasn't pre-written because he was sort of like searching for words in the middle of it and basically saying, you guys are so smart and so young and you'll do great in the job economy because, you got John Fry, my best pal, John Fry. You guys really did,
Is that what he
you guys
said?
really did great. It was so asinine. And I have to remind every American that I don't know the date, in the 60s, when John F. Kennedy was president, he gave a commencement speech to American University that was so good that the Soviet leadership literally started to reproach America and say, we might actually be able to do détente with these people.
Yeah.
So just compare and contrast. I think Jimmy Dore ran a segment about multiple college commencement speakers, which were just like these, basically like these Deloitte consultants that are just talking about, you guys have AI and you're going to be at the forefront of the job market with AI. And every kid is just like, boo. They're just booing them. It's so amazing. Just look at the caliber of leadership that we have. The people who are put there to speak to graduating and people from supposedly getting advanced degrees. Just look at that caliber now and compare it to then. A man who literally did a speech that stopped thermonuclear war. It was so good. And now we have pre-recorded Zoom calls where people don't even write down what they're going to say. It's so emblematic of this whole country, okay? Of every piece of leadership from top to bottom. It needs to stop. Those people need to be put in a state of shock. They need to be upended. They need to be replaced. And the people who replace them need to be so good that they can operate on a shoestring budget with zero time and lots of pressure. That's what a leader does, And we don't have that right now. Hopefully, that can be the only good thing that could come out of this. The rest of it will be, sadly, destruction of our economy and our social fabric. I hate to say it, but we're hoping for new leadership. It'll have to be built, I think, too, from people of our generation, But I'm glad we did this. This is such a really telling graph. It's about 1 a.m. here. I really got to go to bed. I was like in the house and I was like, I couldn't do this because I know I'd just be like yelling at the screen. My roommates would be like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Petroleum? What is he yelling about? But thanks for doing this. Maybe we'll do a reaction next time. I got to get the video downloaded right and test that before we do it. But that episode 14 or 13, I can't remember. Death and Narratives podcast. Thanks, Conrad, for joining me.